He's having a stroke. Call 911. Dr. Quinn Marshall's voice cuts through the chaos of Seattle's Lux Haven restaurant, her hands steady as she saves her boyfriend William Harper from collapse. Moments before, his family, Evelyn and Rachel, scorned her, their icy words dripping with prejudice against her black heritage, dismissing her brilliance as a doctor. Yet in this heart-pounding crisis, Quinn's courage shines. Where are you listening from? London, Lagos, or closer to Seattle? What's your time zone? Guess how Quinn turns their disdain into awe. Will her strength break their barriers, or will her heart face deeper wounds? Subscribe and hit the bell to catch our latest stories, and share below where you're tuning in. Will Quinn forgive the family's cruelty? Can love survive betrayal? Stick around. This tale of triumph will keep you gripped until the final moment. The winter night in Seattle was sharp, a January frost biting at the air as Dr. Quinn Marshall stepped from the sleek black Tesla, her heels clicking against the cobblestone path leading to Lux Haven. The restaurant rose before her like a cathedral of wealth, its glass facade shimmering under the glow of golden chandeliers that spilled light onto the snow-dusted street. Fairy lights twinkled along the entrance, framing a world of privilege Quinn had never fully belonged to. Yet tonight, January 15th, 2025, she was here to claim her place. Her emerald green dress clung to her graceful frame, the silk catching the moonlight like a second skin. Her long, straight black hair cascaded over her shoulders, a dark river that framed her radiant face, and her deep brown eyes gleamed with a fire that no chill could dim. At 32, Quinn was a force, a general practitioner whose decade of experience had saved countless lives, from factory workers to billionaires who sent her handwritten gratitude from their penthouses. Her hands, steady in operating rooms, had stitched wounds and soothed fears, earning her a reputation as a healer whose brilliance outshone doubt. But tonight was no hospital ward. Tonight, she faced a different crucible, the family of her boyfriend, William "Will" Harper, a 34-year-old white tech entrepreneur whose startup had made him a darling of Seattle's elite. Their 3-year relationship had been a tapestry of late-night talks and shared dreams. But this dinner, the first meeting with his mother, Evelyn, and sister, Rachel, loomed like a storm on the horizon. Will rounded the car, his navy suit crisp, his blue eyes bright against the night. His sandy hair caught the glow of the restaurant's lanterns, and his smile was a beacon, warm but fleeting. "You're going to charm them, Quinn," he said, taking her hand, his voice a soft anchor. "They'll see why I love you." His confidence was earnest, but Quinn felt a prickle of doubt, a whisper from years of walking into rooms where her dark skin was a question mark. She'd faced skeptical professors, patients who glanced at her degree twice, yet she'd always risen, her scalpel and wit sharper than their biases. Tonight she squared her shoulders, her smile a shield. "Let's do this," she said, her tone weaving grace with steel. The heavy glass doors parted, revealing a foyer that felt plucked from a fairy tale. Marble floors gleamed beneath a chandelier, its crystal prisms scattering light like diamonds across velvet drapes and gold-trimmed walls. The air was thick with the scent of truffle and rosemary, mingling with the murmur of Seattle's elite, men in tuxedos, women in gowns that whispered of Paris runways. A string quartet's melody curled through the space, a delicate counterpoint to the clink of champagne flutes. Quinn's gaze swept the room, cataloging details with a doctor's precision, the flicker of candlelight on silverware, the glint of a diamond bracelet, the weight of expectation in the air. Will led her toward a reserved table near a towering window, the Seattle skyline a constellation of neon beyond the glass. Already seated were Evelyn Harper, her silver blonde hair swept into a chignon, her pearl necklace a quiet boast of old money, and Rachel Harper, her sleek blonde bob framing a face sharpened by youth and privilege. Their dresses, Evelyn's sapphire, Rachel's ivory, were understated but screamed wealth. Their smiles were polished, practiced, but their eyes, pale and appraising, lingered on Quinn's skin, her hair, her presence, as if measuring her against an invisible ledger. "Dr. Marshall, is it?" Evelyn said, her voice smooth as polished stone but edged with a chill that cut deeper than the winter outside. She extended a hand, her handshake limp, fleeting, as if touching Quinn might tarnish her. "Williams told us you're a doctor. Quite unexpected." The pause before the unexpected was a blade, subtle but deliberate, slicing at Quinn's place in their world. Her pale blue eyes flicked over Quinn's dress, calculating its cost, its right to be here. Quinn's smile didn't falter. "Mrs. Harper, thank you for having me," she said, her voice warm but measured, a shield against the jab. She sat, her posture impeccable, her hands folded in her lap like a warrior at rest. "I'm honored to meet Will's family." Rachel leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the chandelier's glow, her lips curling into a smirk that was all teeth. "Yeah, a general practitioner, that's interesting," she said, her tone sugary but sharp. "I thought specialists were the ones who made it big. Guess you got lucky with some rich patients, huh?" The word lucky landed like a stone, implying Quinn's success was a fluke, a gift from chance rather than a decade of sweat and skill. Quinn's fingers tightened briefly around her napkin, but her expression remained serene, her eyes locking, onto Rachel's with quiet resolve. "I love what I do," she said, her voice steady, resonant. "Helping people, whether they're factory workers or CEOs, is why I'm a doctor. Every life matters." Her words were a deflection, a scalpel cutting through Rachel's barb with precision. She caught Will's glance, hoping for a nod, a spark of support, but he was already turning, his attention snagged by a business associate waving from the EI. Drevelin swirled her wine, her smile tightening. "How noble," she said, the word flat, not a compliment. "But your background, Brooklyn, wasn't it? Must be a far cry from this." She gestured to the restaurant's opulence, her tone suggesting Quinn's roots were a stain, unworthy of their gilded circle. "I'm proud of where I'm from," Quinn replied, her gaze unwavering, her voice a quiet fire. "My parents, a nurse and a bus driver, taught me to work for what I want. I earned my way through Columbia Medical School." Her pride was a beacon, unshaken by Evelyn's disdain, but inside a familiar ache stirred. She'd faced rooms like this before, where her skin was a puzzle to be solved, her worth a debate. Yet here, with Will's family, the stakes felt sharper, the scrutiny a blade aimed at her heart. Will returned, sliding into his seat, his smile bright but oblivious to the undercurrent. "Mom, Rachel, isn't Quinn amazing?" he said, his hand brushing hers under the table. His warmth was a lifeline, but Quinn felt the weight of Evelyn's gaze, Rachel's smirk, a silent jury assessing her right to sit beside him. The quartets. Melody swelled. The chandelier's light danced, but the air grew heavier, a storm brewing beneath the festive glow. Quinn took a slow breath, her resolve hardening. This was only the beginning, and she was ready to face whatever came next, her light undimmed. The chandelier's golden glow bathed the Luxhaven dining room, its crystal prisms casting fractured light across the mahogany table where Dr. Quinn Marshall sat, her emerald green dress a defiant splash against the muted elegance of Seattle's elite. The string quartet's melody wove through the air, a delicate veil over the clink of silverware and the murmur of wealth, but beneath the festive sheen, a storm brewed. Quinn's long, straight black hair framed her radiant face, her deep brown, eyes sharp with resolve, but her fingers resting on the linen napkin betrayed a faint tremor. She was no stranger to scrutiny. Hospital wards, boardrooms, and lecture halls had taught her to stand tall, but tonight, the stakes were personal. Across from her, Evelyn Harper and her daughter Rachel wielded their smiles like blades, their pale eyes dissecting Quinn's presence with surgical precision. Evelyn tilted her wine glass, the ruby liquid catching the light as she leaned forward, her silver blonde chignon gleaming. "Dr. Marshall," she said, her voice smooth but laced with a patronizing lilt. "William tells us you've been practicing for, 10 years? That's quite a commitment for someone so young." The word young hung heavy, a veiled jab at Quinn's audacity to rise so far, so fast, as if her blackness made her achievement suspect. Quinn's smile was a polished shield, her voice steady. It's been a decade of purpose, Mrs. Harper. Healing people, whether they're in a factory or a penthouse, is what drives me. I wouldn't trade it. Her words were measured, a quiet assertion of her worth, honed by years of deflecting doubt with grace. She glanced at William Will Harper, hoping for his warmth, but he was turned away, his navy suit sharp as he laughed with a guest at the bar, his sandy hair glowing under the lanterns. The absence of his gaze stung, a crack in the foundation of their 3-year love. Rachel, her blonde bob sleek, twirled a diamond earring, her smirk sharpening. A general practitioner, though? That's bold, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I mean, specialists are the ones who make it, right? You must have gotten lucky with those billionaire patients. The word lucky was a barb, implying Quinn's success was a fluke, not the result of countless nights poring over medical texts at Columbia, of hands steady through life-or-death diagnoses. Quinn's jaw tightened, but her expression remained serene, her eyes locking onto Rachel's with a surgeon's focus. Luck didn't get me through medical school or 10 years of saving lives, she said, her voice low, resonant. Hard work did. Every patient, from a child with a fever to a CEO with a heart condition, gets my all. That's what being a doctor means. Her words were a scalpel, slicing through Rachel's insinuation with precision, but inside a familiar ache stirred. She'd faced this before. Colleagues who questioned her credentials, patients who hesitated at her dark skin, but here with Will's family, the judgment cut deeper. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, her pearl necklace glinting as she sipped her wine. How noble, she said, the word flat, stripped of warmth. But your background, Brooklyn, wasn't it? That must feel worlds away from this. She gestured to the dining room's opulence, the velvet drapes, the gold-rimmed plates. Subtle suggestion that Quinn's roots were a stain, unworthy of their gilded circle. The air grew heavier, the quartet's melody a mocking counterpoint to the tension coiling at the table. I'm proud of where I'm from, Quinn replied, her gaze unwavering, her voice a quiet fire. My parents, a nurse and a bus driver, poured their lives into mine. They taught me to earn my place, and I did, top of my class at Columbia. Her pride was a beacon, unshaken by Evelyn's disdain, but the weight of their scrutiny pressed against her chest. She wasn't just defending herself. She was defending the memory of her mother's late-night shifts, her father's calloused hands, the sacrifices that had built her. Rachel leaned back, her ivory dress catching the light, her smirk undeterred. That's sweet, she said, her voice sugary but sharp. Your parents must be thrilled you've climbed so high. Not many from their situation get to date someone like Will. The word situation landed like a slap, a veiled insult to her. Family's modest life, as if their love and labor were lesser than the Harpers' wealth. The table seemed to shrink, the candlelight flickering like a warning flare. Quinn's fingers gripped the napkin, her heart pounding, but her face remained a mask of calm. My parents taught me that value isn't measured by money, she said, her tone steady but edged with steel. They'd be proud I'm with someone who shares my dreams, not my bank account. Her eyes flicked to Will, a silent plea for him to see the battle she fought. But he was still at the bar, his laughter a distant echo. The betrayal was a quiet wound, his absence louder than Rachel's words. Evelyn set her glass down, the clink, sharp in the charged silence. It's just challenging, isn't it? She mused, her smile tight, her eyes cold. Fitting into a world like ours, William's life, his business, his connections, requires a certain alignment. The word alignment was a dagger, suggesting Quinn's blackness, her Brooklyn roots were a mismatch, a flaw in their pristine narrative. The quartet's notes swelled, but the air was thick, each glance from Evelyn a reminder of Quinn's outsider status. Quinn took a slow breath, her resolve a steel core. I fit where I'm valued, she said, her voice low, resonant, meeting Evelyn's gaze. My world is built on saving lives, not chasing status. Will knows that. Her words were a challenge, a vow that she wouldn't shrink to fit their Expectations, but inside, doubt gnawed. She loved Will's kindness, his dreams, but love felt fragile when he didn't see the slights she saw. The plates before her, caviar, gold-dusted truffles, sat untouched, the festive glow a mockery of the tension coiling within her. Rachel's smirk faltered, her fingers pausing on her earring, but Evelyn's smile tightened, unyielding. The table was a battlefield, and Quinn stood alone, her heart a drumbeat of defiance. She glanced at Will again, his silhouette framed by the bar's glow, and willed him to turn, to stand beside her. But the moment passed, the quartet played on, and Quinn steeled herself, her light undimmed, ready for the next blow in this gilded arena. The Luxhaven dining room pulsed with the string quartet's haunting melody, but to Dr. Quinn Marshall, the notes were a fragile veil over a battlefield. The chandelier's golden light bathed the mahogany table, glinting off gold-rimmed plates and the sapphire of Evelyn Harper's dress, but the warmth was a lie. Quinn sat erect, her emerald-green dress a beacon of defiance, her long, straight, black hair a dark cascade framing her radiant face. Her deep brown eyes, sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, scanned the faces before her. Evelyn's polished smile, Rachel's smirking disdain, each a reminder of the prejudice that had simmered since she'd arrived. The air was thick with the scent of truffle and unspoken judgment, and Quinn's heart beat a steady rhythm of resolve, though her fingers, hidden beneath the table, gripped the linen napkin like a lifeline. Evelyn Harper leaned forward, her silver-blonde chignon catching the chandelier's glow, her wineglass tilted like a scepter. "Quinn," she said, her voice deceptively light, a velvet glove over a steel fist. "Your work must be so consuming. All those long hours in the hospital. It's a wonder you find time for William's world." The word consuming lingered, a subtle jab at Quinn's ability to balance love with her career, as if her dedication as a black doctor made her unfit for their elite circle. Quinn's smile was unwavering, a shield forged in years of facing doubt. "It's demanding, Mrs. Harper," she replied, her tone calm but firm. "But saving lives is my calling. Last week I diagnosed a rare infection in a patient others missed. He's home now with his family." A touch of pride colored her words, a quiet assertion of her skill, but she caught the flicker in Evelyn's eyes, disdain, not admiration. Rachel, her blonde bob sleek, sprawled in her chair, her ivory dress shimmering with privilege. "That's intense," she said, her tone sugary but sharp as a blade. "Getting to that level, especially from where you're from, must have been a climb. Your parents, they're what, a nurse and a bus driver? Bet they're shocked you're even here." The word shocked was a barb, cloaked in flattery, implying Quinn's Brooklyn roots and her parents' modest lives were a barrier, their pride in her a novelty. Quinn's breath caught, her heart stinging. Her parents, her mother's weary smiles after night shifts, her father's calloused hands fixing her bike, were her foundation, her North Star. To hear them belittled, reduced to a punchline, was a wound deeper than any aimed at her. "My parents are my strength," she said, her voice low, resonant, her eyes locking onto Rachel's. "They taught me to earn my place, and I have. Every degree, every patient saved." Her words were a fire, burning away the insult. But the ache remained, raw and unyielding. Evelyn swirled her wine, her smile venomous now, no longer veiled. "It's just challenging, dear," she mused, her pale blue eyes cold as the January night outside. "Fitting into our circle. William's life, his tech empire, his connections requires a certain compatibility. Your parents, bless them, probably wouldn't understand this world." The word compatibility was a dagger, and the mention of her parents was a deliberate strike, suggesting their lives, their love, were too small, too ordinary for the Harpers' gilded realm. Quinn's fingers tightened around the napkin, her pulse a drumbeat of fury. Her parents weren't just a nurse and a bus driver. They were the heartbeat of her journey, the ones who'd sacrificed sleep and savings for her dreams. To hear them dismissed, as if their existence were a flaw, was a line crossed, a boundary, shattered. She glanced at Will Harper, her anchor for 3 years, hoping for his voice, his hand, anything to bridge this chasm. But Will was across the room, his navy suit sharp against the bar's glow, laughing with a guest, his sandy hair catching the light. His absence was a betrayal, a silence louder than Evelyn's words, and it cut deeper than any insult. The quartet's melody faltered, a single note hanging in the air like a warning. Quinn's chest tightened, her resolve fraying under the weight of their cruelty and Will's neglect. She'd faced prejudice before, professors who doubted her mind, patients who questioned her hands. But this was different. This was the family of the man she loved, and their judgment was a blade aimed at her very existence. The caviar on her plate sat untouched, the candlelight a mockery of the storm. Within her, "I've had enough," Quinn said, her voice low, a thunderclap in the quiet. She stood, her chair scraping softly against the marble floor, her emerald dress catching the light like a flame. Her eyes swept the table, meeting Evelyn's icy stare, Rachel's faltering smirk. "You don't know my parents and you don't know me. I'm done here." Her words were a vow, a severance of the evening's pretense, and with them a decision crystallized. She couldn't stay with Will, not if love meant enduring this alone. 3 years of shared dreams, of late-night talks felt fragile, crumbling under the weight of his silence. She turned, her heels clicking with purpose, her long hair swaying like a banner of defiance. The dining room seemed to still, the elite, guests' murmurs fading as they sensed the shift, their eyes following the black woman who moved with the grace of a warrior. Quinn's heart pounded, a mix of heartbreak and liberation as she reached for her coat at the hostess stand. The Seattle skyline loomed beyond the window, its neon spires a canvas of possibility. But her future with Will was a closed door, one she was ready to shut. The air grew thick, the quartet's notes tentative as if holding their breath. Quinn's hand brushed the wool of her coat, her resolve a steel core, but a sudden gasp from the crowd behind her pierced the silence. Sharp and urgent. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. But in that moment, Quinn was poised to walk away, her dignity intact, her heart bruised but unbroken, ready to leave the Harpers' world behind. The Luxhaven dining room was a frozen tableau, its golden chandelier casting fractured light across the marble floor where Dr. Quinn Marshall stood, her hand poised on the wool of her coat. The string quartet's melody had stilled, the air thick with the scent of truffle and the weight of her resolve. Her emerald green dress glowed like a flame, her long, straight black hair a dark cascade. But her deep brown eyes burned with a fire no betrayal could extinguish. Moments ago, she'd declared her departure, her heart bruised by the Harper family's cruelty and Will Harper's silence. She was ready to walk away, to leave their gilded world behind, when a sharp gasp sliced through the silence, followed by a scream that shattered the restaurant's elegance. Quinn spun, her heels clicking, her gaze cutting through the crowd. Will staggered from the bar, his navy suit rumpled, his sandy hair falling into his ashen face. His blue eyes, once bright, were wide with panic as he clutched his chest, his knees buckling. "Help!" he rasped, his voice a broken thread before collapsing, his body convulsing in violent seizures. The dining room erupted, glasses clinked, chairs scraped, and guests surged back, their murmurs rising to a frantic hum. Evelyn Harper's shriek pierced the chaos, her sapphire dress tangling as she lurched forward. "William!" she cried, her silver blonde chignon unraveling, her composure ash. Rachel, her blonde bob bouncing, froze, her ivory dress stark against her pale face. "Oh my God, what's happening?" she stammered, her hands fumbling for her phone, dropping it in a clatter. The elite crowd parted, their tuxedos and gowns a blur as servers hovered, trays rattling, unsure where to turn. Quinn's heart pounded, but her instincts, honed by a decade of saving lives, kicked in like a switch. She dropped her coat, her dress trailing as she rushed to Will's side, kneeling beside him, her hand steady despite the storm around her. "He's having a stroke. Call 911. Quinn barked, her voice a blade cutting through the den. Her fingers found Will's wrist, his pulse rapid and thready, a warning flare in her mind. His face was contorted, lips tinged blue, his body jerking with each seizure. "Will, stay with me," she said, her tone calm but commanding, her eyes locking onto his, willing him to hold on. She tilted his head to clear his airway, her hands moving with surgical precision, stabilizing his position to prevent injury. The crowd's clamor faded, her focus narrowing to the man before her, not her boyfriend, but a patient, a life in her hands. "Evelyn, any aspirin here?" Quinn called, her voice sharp, scanning the table. Evelyn, her hands trembling, shook her head, her pearl necklace glinting with her panic. We don't keep it out," she wailed, her poise reduced to a whisper. Rachel, tears streaming, clutched her mother's arm, useless in the face of crisis. Quinn turned to a server, his tray shaking, his eyes wide. "Check the kitchen. Staff supplies, first aid kit, low-dose aspirin now," she ordered, her authority absolute. The server nodded, sprinting toward the back, his footsteps a faint echo in the chaos. Quinn's mind raced through protocols, her trauma rotations a steel core against the panic. She wasn't an ER doctor, but she'd faced cardiac emergencies, strokes, and seizures in the crucible of hospital wards. Her hands monitored Will's pulse, her voice a lifeline. "Slow breaths, Will, I've got you," she said. Though his eyes were unfocused, his body still twitching. The crowd pressed closer, their whispers a tide. Who is she? A doctor? But Quinn shut them out, her world reduced to the man before her and the seconds ticking by. The server returned breathless, a single 81 milligram aspirin tablet in his palm. "Chew it slowly," Quinn instructed, guiding Will's trembling jaw, her fingers brushing his clammy skin. "It'll thin your blood, buy us time." She counted seconds in her head, her training a beacon in the storm. Will's seizures eased. Slightly, his breathing shallow but steadier, and Quinn's chest tightened with cautious relief. She wasn't saving him for the Harpers' approval or for the love that had fractured moments ago. She was saving him because it was who she was, a healer who didn't falter. Sirens wailed outside, a piercing promise of help. Paramedics burst. Through the glass doors, their red bags clattering, their boots heavy on the marble. Quinn rose, her dress creased with sweat and urgency, her voice crisp as she briefed them. "Male, 34, suspected ischemic stroke, seizure onset 5 minutes ago, aspirin administered 3 minutes ago, vitals unstable but holding." The lead medic, a grizzled man with steady eyes, nodded, impressed. "Good work, Doc," he said, hooking Will to a monitor, an oxygen mask slipping over his pale face. Quinn stepped back, her heart hammering, her breath steadying as the paramedics worked. Will's body, now still, was lifted onto a stretcher, the wheels rattling against the floor. The dining room was a tableau of shock, guests clutching their phones, servers frozen, the quartet silent. Evelyn clutched Rachel, her sobs muffled, her eyes flickering to Quinn with something new, fear perhaps, or awe. Rachel's wide eyes followed Quinn, her earlier disdain erased, replaced by a trembling respect. Quinn stood tall, her long hair catching the chandelier's light, her emerald dress stained but radiant. The crowd's whispers grew. "She saved him, that black doctor, did you see?" Their phones already buzzing with the story of the woman who'd turned chaos into order. Quinn's gaze swept the room, cataloging the faces, the shift in the air. She'd acted not for their praise, but because lives mattered, because her hands were built to heal, even when her heart was breaking. The paramedics wheeled Will toward the doors, the stretcher's wheels a soft underscore to Evelyn's cries. Quinn's heels clicked as she retrieved her coat, her resolve unbroken, but her chest ached with the weight of what she'd done. She'd saved the man she'd been ready to leave, and the irony was a bitter pill. The Seattle skyline loomed beyond the window, its neon spires a silent witness, as Quinn stood poised between the past and an uncertain future, her light undimmed in the face of crisis. The Lux Haven dining room was a shattered mosaic, its golden chandelier casting trembling light across the marble floor where, moments ago, chaos had reigned. The paramedics' footsteps faded, their stretcher's wheels a fading echo as they carried William "Will" Harper into the night. Dr. Quinn Marshall stood near the hostess stand, her emerald green dress creased with sweat and urgency, her long, straight black hair catching the flickering glow like a dark halo. Her deep brown eyes, sharp with a surgeon's focus, surveyed the room, cataloging the stunned faces of Seattle's elite. The string quartet remained silent, the air heavy with the scent of spilled wine and the weight of what had transpired. Quinn's heart pounded, not from the crisis she'd just mastered, but from the realization of what she'd done, saved the man whose family had scorned her, whose silence had wounded her. The crowd's whispers swirled like a rising tide. "She's a doctor, saved his life, did you see?" Their phones already alight with the story of the black woman who'd turned panic into precision. Guests in tuxedos and gowns hovered, their eyes a mix of awe and curiosity, fixed on Quinn as if she'd parted the sea. The mahogany table, once a battlefield of prejudice, now stood abandoned, its gold-rimmed plates untouched, caviar congealing in the candlelight. Evelyn Harper clutched a chair, her sapphire dress askew, her silver blonde chignon unraveling like her composure. Rachel, her blonde bob limp, gripped her mother's arm, her ivory dress stark against her tear-streaked face. The Harpers earlier. Disdain had crumbled, exposed in the harsh light of Quinn's competence. Evelyn stepped forward, her pearl necklace glinting in her trembling hands. Her pale blue eyes, once cold, now flickered with something raw. Fear, perhaps, or a crack. In her fortress of privilege. "Dr. Marshall," she said, her voice shaky, a shadow of its former polish. "Thank you. For William, we were wrong. I'm so sorry." The words were a fracture, a concession wrung from the chaos, but they hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her earlier cruelty. Quinn's gaze met Evelyn's, her expression serene but unyielding, a warrior's calm after battle. "I did what I was trained to do," she said, her voice low, resonant, cutting through the room's murmur. "Saving lives is my duty, not a favor." Her words were a shield, deflecting the apology's warmth, for the sting of Evelyn's barbs, her dismissal of Quinn's roots, her veiled jabs, still lingered, a wound too fresh to heal. Rachel stumbled forward, her diamond earrings dull in the dimming light, her bravado gone. "Quinn, I was awful," she said, her voice cracking, tears spilling over her flushed cheeks. "What you did for Will, you're incredible. I'm so sorry for everything I said." Her hands twisted, clutching her purse as if it could anchor her shame. The crowd leaned in, their whispers softening, captivated by the drama unfolding before them. Quinn's fingers brushed the wool of her coat, still draped over her arm, her heart a drumbeat of resolve. "Words hurt, Rachel," she said, her tone firm but not unkind, her eyes locking onto the younger woman's. "You judged me, my family, without knowing us. I saved Will because it's who I am, not because I owe you." Her voice was a quiet thunder, stripping the Harpers' remorse bare, and the room held its breath, the weight of her truth palpable. She wasn't here to absolve them. She was here to stand in her power, unbroken. The dining room's air had shifted, the festive glow of the chandeliers now a stark spotlight on the Harpers' exposed prejudice. Guests murmured, their phones capturing the moment, the story of the black doctor who'd silenced scorn with skill, spreading like wildfire. A woman in a ruby gown whispered to her companion, "She's a hero." And the words rippled, a tide of respect Quinn had earned in blood and sweat. The servers, once frozen, moved tentatively, clearing spilled glasses, their eyes darting to Quinn with quiet reverence. Evelyn's lips parted, as if to speak again, but no words came. Her hands trembled, her authority undone, and she stepped, back clutching Rachel's arm. Rachel's gaze dropped, her fingers knotting her purse strap, a flicker of shame crossing her features. The crowd's attention was a living thing, its weight pressing against Quinn. But she stood tall, her long hair a banner of defiance, her dress a testament to the storm she'd weathered. She'd saved Will not for their applause, but because lives mattered, because her hands were built to heal, even when her heart ached. Quinn's thoughts flickered to her parents, her mother's weary smiles, her father's steady hands, whose sacrifices had forged her strength. The Harpers' earlier insults, their dismissal of her Brooklyn roots burned in her memory. But this moment was hers. She'd turned their prejudice into a mirror, forcing them to see her brilliance. The skyline beyond the window shimmered, its neon spires a silent promise of a world beyond this room. And Quinn felt a spark of liberation, fragile but real. She smoothed her dress, her heels clicking as she turned toward the glass doors, her coat draped over her arm. "I'm going to the hospital," she said, her voice clear, addressing one and everyone. "To check on Will." The words were a declaration, not of loyalty to the Harpers, but of her duty as a doctor, her identity as a healer. The crowd parted, their murmurs softening, and a man in a tuxedo nodded, his eyes bright. With respect, "Godspeed, Doctor," he said, and others echoed, a chorus of admiration. Quinn's heart was heavy, the weight of the night's wounds pressing against her chest. The Harpers' apologies, though sincere, were late, their prejudice a scar she couldn't erase. She moved toward the exit, her long hair catching the chandelier's final glow, her resolve a steel core. The restaurant's opulence, the velvet drapes, the gold-dusted truffles felt hollow, a backdrop to a victory she hadn't sought but had won. As she stepped into the January night, the cold air a sharp embrace, Quinn knew this was her triumph, not theirs, and she carried her light forward, undimmed. The sterile hum of Seattle General Hospital was a stark contrast to the opulence of Lux Haven, its fluorescent lights casting a cold glow across the linoleum floor. Dr. Quinn Marshall stood outside room 304, her emerald green dress, creased from the night's chaos, her long, straight black hair pulled into a loose knot, strands framing her radiant but weary face. Her deep brown eyes, sharp with resolve, traced the door's metal frame, her heart a heavy drumbeat. The January night pressed against the window, Seattle's skyline a distant shimmer, but the weight of the evening, Will's stroke, his family's prejudice, their belated apologies, clung to her like damp frost. Quinn had saved Will's life, but the cost of that act, the fracture of their 3-year love, loomed like a shadow she could no longer outrun. She pushed the door open, the soft creak a prelude to the reckoning ahead. The room was dim, lit by a single lamp that bathed Will Harper in a pale glow. He lay propped on pillows, his navy suit replaced by a hospital gown, his sandy hair limp against his forehead. His blue eyes, once bright with dreams, were clouded, with pain and gratitude as they found her. Monitors beeped softly, a steady rhythm underscoring the IV drip in his arm. The stroke had been caught early, thanks to Quinn's swift action, but the man before her was a stranger. His silence in the face of his family's cruelty, a wound that bled anew. "Quinn," Will rasped, his voice weak but urgent, his hand reaching for hers across the crisp white sheets. "You saved my life." His fingers trembled and his eyes glistened, a plea woven into the words. "I was an idiot, ignoring you, letting Mom and Rachel talk like that. I'm so sorry." His apology was raw, a crack in the facade of the tech mogul, but it landed like a stone in Quinn's chest, heavy with the weight of too little, too late. She stood at the foot of the bed, her posture erect, her dress a faded emblem of the night's battles. The memory of Evelyn's venomous jabs, Rachel's smirking insults, and Will's laughter at the bar while she fought alone burned in her mind. "I didn't save you for an apology, Will," she said, her voice low, resonant, a quiet thunder. "In the sterile room, I saved you because it's my duty, because I'm a doctor." Her words were a shield, guarding the heart that had loved him fiercely, that had dreamed of a future now crumbling. Will's face crumpled, his hand dropping to the sheet. "I love you, Quinn," he said, his voice breaking. "I messed up. I know. I should have stood up, called them out, give me another chance, please." His plea was a lifeline, a thread of the man who'd shared late-night talks, who'd promised her the stars. But the stars felt distant now, obscured by the pain of his inaction, the Harpers' scorn a scar on her soul. Quinn's fingers brushed the edge of the bed, her heart aching with the weight of 3 years, laughter in coffee shops, quiet mornings. Tangled in sheets, dreams of a life built together. But love wasn't just moments. It was choices, and Will's choice to stay silent had left her to face his family's prejudice alone. "I gave you 3 years, Will," she said, her voice soft but unyielding, her eyes locking onto his. "I fought for us, for me, while you stood by. Love means standing up, especially when it's hard. I can't go back." Her words were a severance, a blade cutting through the fragile thread of their bond, and the room seemed to still, the monitor's beeps a faint echo. Will's eyes filled with tears, his jaw tightening. "I'll change, Quinn," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'll make it right. For you, for us." But his promises felt like echoes, hollow against the reality of her solitude at that mahogany table, the Harper's words slicing at her roots. Quinn's gaze softened, not with forgiveness, but with a quiet sorrow for what might have been. "You deserve to heal, Will," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "But I deserve a love that sees me, that fights for me. I have to choose myself now." Her words were a vow, a reclamation of her worth, forged in the crucible of her parents' sacrifices, her mother's night shifts, her father's steady hands. She stepped back, her heels clicking softly, her dress catching the lamp's faint glow like a fading ember. The hospital room felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of her decision. Outside, the Seattle skyline shimmered, its neon spires a canvas of possibility, a world beyond the pain of this night. Quinn's chest ached, but her resolve was a steel core, tempered by years of rising above doubt, of proving her place as a black doctor in rooms that questioned her. She'd loved Will, but love wasn't enough without action, without courage. Will's hand fell to the sheet, his eyes glistening with defeat. "I'm sorry, Quinn," he said, his voice barely a whisper, but she was already turning, her long hair swaying like a banner of liberation. The door loomed before her, a threshold to a future she'd write alone. "Take care, Will," she said, her voice steady, a final gift of grace. She pushed the door open, the creak a soft farewell, and stepped into the corridor, the fluorescent light harsh but honest. The hospital's hum enveloped her, the distant clatter of carts, the murmur of nurses a familiar rhythm. Quinn paused, her hand brushing the creased silk of her dress, a relic of the night's triumphs and wounds. She'd saved a life, but more than that, she'd saved herself, choosing her dignity over a love that faltered. The skyline beyond the window called, its lights a promise of new beginnings, and Quinn took a slow breath, her heart heavy but whole. She walked toward the elevator, her heels echoing in the quiet, her long hair catching the light like a crown. The night was far from over, but Quinn was ready, her light undimmed, her path clear. She was a doctor, a daughter, a woman unbroken, and this moment, this reckoning, was hers alone. The Seattle spring of 2025 bloomed with a quiet ferocity, cherry blossoms dusting the streets like pink snow. But for Dr. Quinn Marshall, the season was a crucible of renewal. Her clinic, a modest brick building nestled in the heart of a diverse neighborhood, hummed with purpose, its glass doors etched with the words, "Marshall Health." Inside, the air carried the faint scent of antiseptic and hope, a stark contrast to the gilded venom of Lux Haven 3 months prior. Quinn, her long, straight black hair tied back, moved through the exam room, her white coat crisp, her deep brown eyes alight with focus. At 32, she was a beacon, a black doctor whose decade of healing had saved countless lives. And now, in the wake of heartbreak, she was forging a legacy that no prejudice could dim. The exam room was a sanctuary, its walls adorned with children's drawings and thank-you notes from patients. Quinn knelt before a young girl, Aisha, whose asthma had once chained her to hospital beds. "Breathe deep for me, sweetheart," Quinn said, her voice warm, steady, as she pressed a stethoscope to Aisha's chest. The girl's breaths were clear, a triumph of Quinn's tailored treatment plan. "You're a champ," Quinn said, her smile a spark, and Aisha's mother, tears brimming, clasped her hands. "You gave us our daughter back, Dr. Marshall." The words were a balm, soothing the scars left by the Harpers' scorn, by Will's silence. Quinn's days were a whirlwind of action, diagnosing fevers, stitching wounds, counseling elders. But her nights belonged to research. In a small office lit by a single lamp, she pored over medical journals, her laptop screen glowing with data on chronic illness interventions. Her latest project, a protocol for early detection of sepsis, had caught the eye of global health journals. She typed furiously, her fingers dancing across the keys, each word a brick in the foundation of her future. The memory of that January night, Evelyn's icy jabs, Rachel's barbs, Will's betrayal fueled her, not as pain but as fire. She'd chosen herself, and now she was building a world where her worth was undeniable. Her clinic had become a haven, especially for the underserved, immigrants, single parents, the uninsured, who found in Quinn not just a doctor, but a champion. One afternoon, she treated a billionaire, Mr. Ellison, whose rare infection had baffled specialists. "You're a miracle worker," he said, his voice gruff, pressing a check for her clinic into her hand. Quinn accepted it, not for herself, but for the new equipment it would buy, the lives it would save. Her reputation soared, her name whispered. In boardrooms and tenements alike, a testament to her skill and heart. Yet the past lingered, a shadow at the edges of her triumph. Late one evening, as rain pattered against the clinic's windows, Quinn's phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a message from Rachel Harper. "Quinn, I was awful that night. I'm so sorry. Can we talk? I want to make this right." The words were tentative, raw, a crack in the Harper armor. Quinn's fingers hovered over the screen, her heart a tangle of caution and curiosity. Rachel's tearful apology at Lux Haven had been sincere, but words were cheap without action. "Actions matter, Rachel," Quinn typed, her voice echoing in her mind, firm but open. "I'm willing to listen, show me." She hit send, her resolve unshaken but a spark of hope kindled. Perhaps change was possible, even for a Harper. The clinic's waiting room buzzed the next day, patients chatting in Spanish, Somali, and English, their trust in Quinn a living thing. She moved between rooms, her white coat a symbol of her vow to heal, her long hair swaying as she checked charts. A nurse handed her a journal article, her sepsis protocol featured on the cover, and Quinn's chest swelled with quiet pride. She'd turned pain into purpose, her parents' sacrifices, her mother's late shifts, her father's steady hands, woven into every life she saved. The Harpers' prejudice had been a storm, but Quinn was the oak, rooted and rising. Her work drew attention beyond Seattle. At a medical conference in a sleek downtown hotel, Quinn stood at a podium, her voice clear, resonant, as she presented her research to a packed room. "Early intervention saves lives," she said, her slides sharp, her data compelling. The audience, doctors, researchers, hospital directors leaned forward, captivated by her clarity, her fire. Among them was Dr. Thomas Bennett, a hospital director whose hazel eyes followed her with quiet admiration. As Quinn stepped off the stage, applause thundering, Thomas approached, his smile warm, genuine. "Dr. Marshall, your work is groundbreaking," he said, his voice earnest. "I'd love to discuss a collaboration with Seattle General." Quinn's eyes met his, her smile cautious but intrigued. "I'm listening," she said, her tone professional, but a spark flickered, a connection, not of romance but of respect, a promise of shared purpose. The conference hall buzzed, the city's skyline shimmering beyond the windows, and Quinn felt the weight of her victory. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Her clinic a beacon, her research a flame. The Harpers' shadow lingered, but it was faint, outshone by her light. As she left the hotel, her white coat folded over her arm, Quinn paused under the cherry blossoms, their petals swirling like confetti. Her phone held Rachel's message, a question mark, but her heart held certainty. She was Dr. Quinn Marshall, daughter of a nurse and a bus driver, healer of the broken, and no one, not Will, not the Harpers, could dim her. The spring air was crisp, the city alive with possibility, and Quinn walked forward, her long hair catching the sunlight, her resolve a steel core, ready to shape a future as bold as her dreams. The Seattle summer of 2025 shimmered with a restless energy, the Puget Sound sparkling under a sky streaked with amber clouds. Dr. Quinn Marshall stood in the conference room of Seattle General Hospital, her white coat folded over her arm, her long, straight black hair catching the sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. At 32, her radiant face bore the quiet strength of a woman who'd turned heartbreak into triumph, her deep brown eyes alight with purpose. Her clinic thrived, her research on chronic illness interventions earning accolades. But today, August 10, 2025, she was here for a different reason. A collaboration with Dr. Thomas Bennett, the hospital's director, whose respect had sparked something new in her guarded heart. The room hummed with the scent of fresh coffee and anticipation, a stark contrast to the sterile pain of that January night at Lux Haven. Thomas, a white man in his early 40s, stood at the head of a polished oak table, his hazel eyes warm, his tailored blazer framing a lean, confident frame. His dark hair was flecked with silver, a testament to years of leading with steady hands. "Dr. Marshall," he said, his voice smooth but earnest, gesturing to a chair. "Your sepsis protocol could transform our ER. Let's brainstorm integration." His smile was genuine, free of the condescension Quinn had faced from others, and she felt a flicker of ease, rare since the Harpers' betrayal. Quinn sat, her posture poised, her navy blouse a subtle nod to professionalism. "I'm all ears, Dr. Bennett," she said, her tone warm but measured, her eyes meeting his with a doctor's focus. The table was strewn with charts and tablets, her research data glowing on a screen behind them. As they dove into logistics, staff training, patient triage, Quinn's voice was clear, her insights sharp, drawing nods from the hospital team. Thomas listened intently, his questions probing, but respectful, his laughter at her dry wit a spark in the room's clinical air. "You've thought of everything," he said, his eyes crinkling, and Quinn's chest warmed not with romance but with the rare joy of being seen. Their meetings stretched over weeks, the conference room giving way to coffee shops and hospital corridors, their collaboration a bridge of shared purpose. One evening in a cozy cafe near the waterfront, the scent of espresso mingling with sea salt, Thomas leaned across a small table, his hazel eyes steady. "Quinn," he said, dropping the formal title, "your work isn't just data. It's lives. I've read your papers, seen your clinic's impact. You're changing the game." His words were a tribute, not flattery, and Quinn's guard softened, her smile genuine. "Thank you, Thomas," she said, her voice soft, her long hair catching the cafe's amber light. "It's about the patients, giving them a chance no matter who they are." She spoke of her clinic, of Aisha's clear lungs, of the billionaire who'd funded her equipment, and Thomas listened, his gaze never wavering. He shared his own story, years in trauma wards, the weight of leadership, the belief that medicine should serve all. Their conversation flowed, touching on race, privilege, the barriers they'd both faced, his candor a balm to Quinn's scars from the Harpers' prejudice. The city's pulse beat around them, ferries gliding across the sound, gulls crying. In the dusk, Quinn's heart, once bruised by Will's silence, stirred with a cautious hope. Thomas wasn't Will, his respect was action, his words backed by a life of integrity. Yet she held back, her trust a fragile thing, tempered by the memory of a love that faltered under pressure. "You're easy to talk to," she said, her tone light but probing, "but I'm not one for rushing in." Thomas's smile was gentle, his eyes steady. "I'm not going anywhere, Quinn," he said, his voice a promise, not a demand. Their partnership deepened, their meetings a rhythm of work and warmth. At a hospital gala, the ballroom aglow with chandeliers, Quinn stood in a sapphire gown, her hair a dark cascade, her presence commanding. Thomas, in a crisp tuxedo, approached, offering a glass of sparkling water. "You outshine the room," he said, his tone sincere, and Quinn laughed, a sound that felt like freedom. They danced, his hand steady at her waist, their steps a quiet harmony. "You're not bad at this," she teased, her eyes bright, and he grinned. "Years of practice, but you make it easy." The night air was crisp as they stepped onto a balcony, the skyline a constellation of steel and light. Thomas turned to her, his voice low, earnest. "Quinn, you're more than a colleague. You're someone I want in my life, not just my hospital. I respect you, your work, and your heart. I want to build something real if you're open." His words were a bridge, not a demand, his hazel eyes searching hers, unguarded. Quinn's breath caught, her heart a tangle of hope and caution. She'd rebuilt herself, her clinic a testament to her strength, her parents' sacrifices, her mother's late shifts, her father's calloused hands, her foundation. Thomas saw her not as a symbol or a conquest, but as Quinn, whole and fierce. "I'm not saying no," she said, her voice soft but firm, her eyes meeting his. "But I need time. Real means trust, and I'm learning that again." Her words were a vow, a step toward possibility, and Thomas nodded, his smile warm. "I'll wait," he said, his voice steady, a promise woven into the night. They stood in silence, the city's pulse a soft underscore, the stars faint but present. Quinn's long hair caught the moonlight, her sapphire gown a reflection of her resilience. She wasn't ready to love, not yet, but the spark with Thomas was real, a seed planted in respect. The waterfront stretched before them, its waves a whisper of new beginnings, and Quinn felt her heart open, just a fraction, to a future she might choose. The Seattle autumn of 2026 burned with a fierce beauty, maple leaves blazing crimson against a sky of endless blue. Dr. Quinn Marshall stood. On the waterfront, the Puget Sound's waves lapping at the shore, their rhythm a mirror to her steady heart. Her long, straight black hair caught the October breeze, a dark cascade framing her radiant face, her deep brown eyes gleaming with a quiet joy. At 33, Quinn was a titan, a black doctor whose clinic, Marshall Health, had become a beacon for the underserved, her research saving lives from Seattle to Shanghai. The scars of that January night at Lux Haven, the Harpers' prejudice, Will's betrayal, had faded, not erased, but transformed into the fuel of her triumph. Tonight, October 15th, 2026, she stood whole, her life a tapestry of purpose and love, woven with the threads of her unyielding strength. The waterfront was alive, fairy lights strung along the pier, their glow dancing on the water. Quinn's sapphire dress shimmered, a nod to the gala where her connection with Dr. Thomas Bennett had deepened. Thomas stood beside her, his hazel eyes warm, his dark hair silver-flecked, his tailored blazer framing a steady presence. Their relationship, now a year strong, was a partnership forged in respect. Late nights debating treatment protocols, mornings sharing coffee and dreams, always grounded in a love that saw her fully. "You're glowing tonight," Thomas said, his voice soft, his hand brushing hers, a touch that felt like home. Quinn smiled, her heart full. "It's the city," she teased, gesturing to the skyline, its neon spires a constellation of possibility. But her joy ran deeper, rooted in her work, her roots, her choice to love again. Her clinic had expanded, a second location opening in a neighboring borough, funded by grants and patients like Mr. Ellison, whose gratitude had bought ventilators and scholarships. Her sepsis protocol, now standard in hospitals nationwide, had slashed mortality rates, her name etched in medical journals and whispered in awe. She'd saved a child from pneumonia last week, a tech mogul from heart failure the month before, each life a testament to her vow to heal, no matter the patient. The pier buzzed with a community event, families laughing, vendors selling steaming Cider. Quinn and Thomas strolled, their steps in sync when a familiar figure approached. Rachel Harper, her blonde bob softened by time, her eyes bright with nervous hope. "Quinn," Rachel said, her voice steady but raw. "I hoped you'd be here." She wore a simple sweater, a far cry from the ivory gown of that fateful night, and held a folder emblazoned with Marshall Health. "I've been volunteering at your clinic," she said, her words rushed, earnest. "6 months now, helping. With outreach. This is a proposal for a mobile health unit for rural areas. I want to keep learning, to do better." Quinn's breath caught. The memory of Rachel's tearful apology at Lux Haven and her tentative text months later flashing through her mind. She took the folder, her fingers brushing the paper, her eyes scanning Rachel's careful notes. "This is thoughtful," Quinn said, her tone warm but measured, her gaze meeting Rachel's. "Actions matter, Rachel, and you're showing them. Let's talk next week." Rachel's face lit up, a crack in the Harper legacy mending, and Quinn felt a quiet pride not for forgiving but for inspiring change. Rachel nodded, stepping back, her eyes glistening with gratitude. The crowd thickened, a local band striking up a soulful tune, its notes curling through the air. Thomas squeezed Quinn's hand, his voice low. "You're a force, Quinn. You don't just heal bodies, you heal people, even the ones who hurt you." His words were a mirror, reflecting her strength, and Quinn's chest swelled. She thought of her parents, her mother's late shifts, her father's calloused hands, whose love had built her, their pride now her foundation. The Harpers. Prejudice had been a storm, but Quinn had rebuilt her clinic, her research, hand or heart a testament to her resilience. They paused by the water, the skyline shimmering, its lights a promise kept. Thomas turned to her, his hazel eyes unguarded, his voice a vow. "We're building something real, Quinn. A world where you're seen, always. I'm all in for you, for us." His words echoed their first dance, their first promise. But now, they carried the weight of a year's trust, of a love that didn't falter. Quinn's heart, once guarded, opened fully, her smile radiant. "I'm all in too," she said, her voice soft but certain, her hand tightening in his. She didn't need Thomas to complete her. She was whole. But his love, rooted in action, was a gift she cherished. The band's melody soared, the crowd cheering, and Quinn leaned into Thomas, her sapphire dress catching the fairy light's glow. She reflected on her journey, not just the night at Lux Haven, but the years of rising above doubt, of proving her place as a black doctor in a world that questioned her. Rachel's redemption, her clinic's reach, Thomas's love. These were seeds she'd planted, now blooming. The Harpers' walls hadn't crumbled overnight, but Quinn had cracked them, her light a force no prejudice could dim. The waves lapped at the shore, a reminder that life moved forward. Quinn's long hair danced in the breeze, her eyes tracing the stars, faint but fierce. She was Dr. Quinn Marshall, daughter, healer, lover, warrior, and this chapter her triumph was complete. The city's pulse beat around her, the future a canvas of fire and hope. And as she stood with Thomas, her hand in his, Quinn knew she'd written a story that would echo, a legacy of courage and love that would endure. Thank you for joining Dr. Quinn Marshall's journey of courage, resilience, and triumph. Her story, from facing prejudice to forging a legacy of healing and love, reminds us that strength shines brightest in adversity. What moved you most? Quinn's life-saving. Heroism, her unyielding stand against bias, or her path to a love that honors her worth? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and tell us where you're tuning in from. Seattle, Sydney, or beyond. Your support lights our way, so please like, subscribe, and share to spread Quinn's fire. We're grateful to every one of you, and can't wait to bring you more stories that spark the heart. Until next time, keep shining, keep fighting, and we'll see you soon.